is us still on the phone. That's here it is. He is. Second.
Okay, welcome back. And it's time for the presentation of the June 30th, 2017 audited financial statements. Ms. Edlin, Mr. Lehman, Mr. Seymour.
Good afternoon.
And how are you all today? Ms.
Good, how are
Reeves.
you? Kim unfortunately can't be here today, and this is Bill Seymour I have with me. He's a partner with SB and Company. And we've contracted with SB and Company for about 9 years now. They are a regional public accounting firm with extensive experience in both the public sector and the private sector. Bill has over 19 years of experience and has worked with various state and local governments. So I will go ahead and turn this presentation over to him.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Once again, my name is Bill Seymour. I'm the engagement partner for the audit, and this represents our required communications under generally accepted auditing standards as well as our firm standards. I was going to walk through this presentation, but please feel free to stop me with any questions that you may have as I go through. Going through starting on page 5 is the scope of services in which we are engaged to perform, which is a financial statement audit of the June 30, 2017 financials, performance of the Uniform Guidance Single Audit, that is a federal grant compliance audit, preparation of Form 990s for the golf course as well as the agricultural center, a compilation of the county's agricultural land transfer tax revenues and expenditures, various agreed upon procedures related to the landfill, schedule of fire and rescue expenditures, an audit of the 911 trust fund, detention center agreed upon procedures, the state charitable registration, which has to do with the Form 990s, as well as preparing the uniform financial report, that is taking the financial statements of the county and putting them in a fit and format that meets the Maryland Department of Legislative Services, how they want to see your financial statements, as well as the preparation of the data collection form, which essentially takes the single audit information and puts it in a fit and format for the federal government. On the next slide is a summary of the results. We have issued an unmodified or clean opinion on the financial statements that effectively says that the financial statements as presented by management are reasonably free of material misstatement. We did not discover any instances of material fraud. We discovered no material weaknesses in internal controls. We received the full cooperation of management. During the course of this year, we've implemented a new GASB 74 for other post-employment benefits. It is the cousin to GASB 67, which was for pensions. Next year, the county will have to implement GASB 75, which will record the net OPEB liability similar to the net pension liability on the face of the financial statements. And we had no audit journal entries that were related to the financial information that was presented by management. Our audit approach is an audit approach. On slide 8 is a risk-based audit approach where we assess where the risk of material misstatement is, then assess and test controls that management has put in place that would mitigate that risk, performance of various analytical procedures and substantive procedures, and then other GAS required items that would allow us to opine and provide that unmodified opinion. Our assessment of the control environment, that is tone at the top, that is what we look at underlying for financial reporting. We follow the COSO model of controls, which is the control environment, risk assessment, the specific control activities, information and communication, and monitoring. And what effectively we are saying here, as it relates to the financial reporting process that the county has, we do not feel that there are any design flaws in the underlying information that was included in the financial statements. That's typically evidenced by if we would have lots of journal entries as we were going through the process, if there were items that lacked authoritative literature, if management had put into place, we were arguing over how to account for items, or if management had taken a very conservative or very aggressive approach as it relates to the financial statements. We had none of those items that we would have to report to you. The only issue that we had during the course of the financial statements actually didn't fall under the county's core reporting model. The school board was also required to adopt GASB 74. The original financial statements that we have received from the school board did not include that requisite information, and we incorporate some of that information in the full set of statements and rely upon the audit that's performed by the school board auditors. Management, as soon as we brought it to their attention, we were able to resolve that matter in a relatively quick manner. The school board was able to provide the audited information to us so that we can appropriately include it within the financial statement. So if you will, while it was a little bit of a hang-up during the course of the process, we were able to satisfy ourselves, and we received full cooperation, not only from management here at the county, but as well as over at the school board as well, in being able to rectify that issue. The underlying key processes and functions, we also look at these once again in terms of accurate financial reporting, treasury, estimation, financial reporting, expenditures, payroll, revenue, fixed assets, and grant compliance. And you can see in all cases, our assessment was both the design and operation of controls was effective. Had we had issues, had we had lots of journal entries, we would use terms like significant deficiency or material weakness. Kind of the line in the sand that we look at it from an external perspective is, had you removed the external auditor from the process, would management create an accurate set of financial statements? And based upon our testing, we believe the answer to that question is yes, which is how we ultimately opine that the design and operation of controls are effective as they relate to financial reporting. Changes for OPEB. The county adopted GASB Statement 74 this year. What that is a series of new footnote disclosures and various actuarial changes in how the OPEB liability is calculated. Next year, we will have to adopt GASB 75. So this is kind of akin to what we went through a couple years ago with GASB 67 and 68. Currently, as of June 30th, we had a net OPEB liability of just under $3 million. Right now on our financial statements, we've actually overfunded the OPEB plan by approximately $3 million. Under the new accounting, is not a funding model anymore. It's strictly based upon the overall health of the trust and what is the difference between that actuarial calculated liability versus the assets that are there. So we will actually reduce the opening net position on the entity-wide financial statements by roughly about $6 million. That is, adding the liability of $3 million and removing the advanced funding of OPEB of $3 million. And I would go and I would tell you that from an external perspective on this, this is the one of the smallest restatements that we have related to GASB 74 and 75. Many other counties have significantly higher balances here. The remaining of the presentation goes through our specific required communications. As I mentioned earlier, our responsibility is to provide reasonable but not absolute assurance that the statements are free of material misstatements. The financial statements are the responsibility of management. Our audit was designed and executed in accordance with auditing standards generally accepted in the United States of America. We had no issues with significant accounting policies, no issues about the applications of those. I mentioned earlier the only what we would term audit adjustment was related to the school board, which was handled appropriately. We had no fraud, no material weaknesses, no disagreements with management, no serious difficulties in performance of the audit. We received a management representation letter as part of the audit. We would be happy to provide a copy of that to you. There was nothing in there that we would term was a non-standard or an item that was, if you will, if management wouldn't have signed this one specific thing, we would have changed the opinion. We are required to have a representation letter under standards, but we can provide one to you. Non-attest services, what this is, we are required to disclose to you what we do that's not necessarily audit related. As part of the work that we perform, we drafted the financial statements from management's information. So all the information came from management. Basically all we did was put it in a fit and format and do the word processing that was associated with that. It does not affect our independence. However, I'm required to tell you about it because independence still from that perspective is in the eye of the beholder. Lastly, our independence, we go through an annual process. I can certify to you that we are independent of the county, and we had no threats that we had identified or had to put in safeguards to be able to guard that independence. Our responsibility related to fraud, fraud, unfortunately, is a reality that affects every single financial statement audit that's out there. Our audit is not a fraud audit. We are required, and we do look for fraud. We ask questions about it, but if there were fraud, we may not necessarily detect all instances of it because we're testing on a materiality level that may be above what occurs at that perspective. So there are some examples of the procedures that we have performed. We performed those procedures, and as I mentioned, did not have any there. The remainder of this just goes through some other information, meeting your expectations, and I will stop there and see if there's any questions that I can address. I want to thank Sarah, Kim, and her team for all of their help in getting us the information, making our job somewhat easy in that we didn't have to wait for information. Management was prepared, and when we did have issues, we were quick to be able to resolve them, and thank them for their cooperation and help.
Good report.
Good report. Any questions from the commissioners? Comments? So if we wanted some information just on a specific say Fort Ritchie, the money the county received to take over the Fort Ritchie project.
Right.
PSK Town Center. How do we get a full report? Look at all of that stuff. So as part of the audit, we do a sample of transactions that we would test. Without looking at what we specifically did, I don't know if how much we would do there. From a test perspective, there's a number of different options that would be on the table that we as a firm would be able to provide to you, where you can get into auditing at a level within the financial statements that is, if you will, more narrow than the financial statements taken as a whole, and being able to provide different levels of attestation, or if you will, assurance related to that. We could do a specific audit on an individual fund and provide an opinion on that fund. We could perform agreed upon procedures, which we could work with you to develop that would, if you will, whatever the question is that you would like to have answered, we can design specific procedures that would enable you to answer that question for there. And then additionally, there are some other the other ways that we would be able to do that. We would be open to working with you to be able to provide that, kind of more from a financial statement perspective, a more precise or more granular level of assurance than what is on the overall financial statements taken as a whole. So myself, county commissioners, we could all put together some questions that we had concerning that fund and work with the administrator to see if we would be interested in working with your firm to provide some answers.
Correct.
I know I am. I don't know if the other commissioners have thought about any of that or not, but I'm just, for myself, I want to make sure we have the money in place that's going to permit us to serve that property until it's developed.
So would your audit look at just the external, how it's reported and what's reported and the accuracy of that? Or would it also look at the internal controls to make sure certain maybe authorizations are there, or both?
When you're speaking of this, you're speaking of what would be additional to what we've already performed. Okay. The short answer is yes to both, and it could be more. And when I mentioned earlier the agreed upon procedures, what those are procedures that we could design together that could answer each of those individual questions. So if you will, not only just looking at what are the numbers, but if there is a specific authorization, for instance, of a transaction that you would want to see, that would be, if you will, different from a financial statement level control, because at a macro level, if somebody spends money within the county, we're not auditing whether or not that was a good decision to spend those funds. What we're auditing is that the fact that those funds were spent showed up appropriately within the financial statements. An agreed upon procedures would allow us to say, you give us the criteria that would say, was this a good spend? Then we could go and audit against that criteria to be able to provide you that answer. So if you will, this transaction needed to be approved by 4 people, or we needed to go through these 6 different processes. And, I'm just, as an example, we can be as precise as you would like us to be within that, because we would set that scope to whatever it is that your comfort level is, versus in a financial statement audit, we are applying to what is generally accepted auditing standards, which is a lot, if you will, more of taking the entire reporting as a whole and not, if you will, at a specific compliance level.
Okay, so I know for myself, I'm going to get with the county administrator, and I don't know if any other commissioners are interested or not, and come up with some thoughts, ideas. May go somewhere and it may not.
Just let us know. We'll be happy to correspond accordingly, and would meet with you at any point that you would need.
Okay.
I just want to say before we close out, thanks to Bill and his team for just being great during audit, and even throughout the year when we need certain things. You guys have been great to work with. And also thank you to the staff from Budget and Finance who helped prepare the financial statements, because without their knowledge and expertise, we would not be as great as we are. We would not be in as great of a position. So thank you to all of you guys.
Thank you for the kind words.
Thank you.
Any other comments, thoughts, commissioners? Okay. Thank you very much.
Did you see this?
Okay, briefing on Next Generation 911.
Or afternoon.
Mr. Gunmanson, how are you today? And you have, I don't see Miss Bardonna Woods. Okay, and Miss Fisher?
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having us. I'd like to introduce Julia Fisher. She is the Geographic Information Officer for the state of Maryland with the Department of Information Technology. We also have here today with Emergency Services, Jennifer Swisher, Jason Klein. For planning, we have Jennifer Kinzer, Megan Jenkins, and Steve Goodrich. We've also got Joe Rathfon and Vaughn Poland from the GIS office. So the subject today is Next Generation 911, and this is just for your information. We're not asking for any action, but this is a nationwide effort to bring 911 up to the next level of technology. We want to review some of the issues which we'll be dealing with here in Washington County and across the country. Ms. Fisher has been heavily involved with this around the state, and she will give you kind of an overview of Next Gen 911. Then I'll touch on a few issues that we'll be dealing with here in Washington County. So, Julia?
Fantastic. Thank you, Bud.
So I just wanted to also add another point to Bud's introduction. I'm also an appointed member of the Emergency Number Systems Board. For those of you who are not familiar, that is the fund which comes in from the collected payment on all phone bills that is pooled and then is provided to all the different counties to support 911 response. There is a GIS seat on that board. I fill that seat and thus very passionate not only about GIS, which is my background, but its applications in the 911 arena, since that obviously touches every single citizen in the state of Maryland and beyond, of course. But so I just kind of wanted to, again, kind of give that scope as to why Bud asked me to be here today, because this is something that, again, I'm very passionate about, and also understand that we need to make sure that we are continuing to discuss and educate so that we can continue to best serve the citizens throughout the state. So I just put together a few pages. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have as we go along. The first page is really just to kind of introduce you to, if you're ever speaking with someone in the 911 arena, they're going to start throwing around a lot of acronyms. Every industry seems to have a significant amount of acronyms, but 911 has some that are very unique to its particular industry. I want to call particularly to the EZNet, our Emergency Services IP network. That's something that I won't get into a lot of detail here, but will be of significance. That is the network that allows all of the dispatch systems to communicate, and thus one of the newer technologies, the modifications and the enhancements that will need to be determined on a larger scale, not just at the county level, but state and potentially regionally. Geographic Information Systems, GIS, and Bud will get into significant detail, but I really want to make sure that you all are aware that in the next generation 911 infrastructure, GIS is at its core. It is its foundation, and therefore a strong foundation of GIS is paramount to any and all next generation 911 system that is implemented. NENA has to do with the National Emergency Number Association. They are more of a standards and guidance organization that the state has been drawing a lot of information and knowledge from in order to kind of coordinate that statewide effort. And then, of course, our public safety answering points, who are very significant, obviously, partners and the significant community as we move from our current standards into the next generation. So I may refer back to some of those as we go forward. If you move to page 2, you'll see just very standard. Today, the way that it works, the call comes in, the number is identified, and then there's actually a list, and it's a written list. It's a database, but it's just a list, and they try to literally match the numbers from your list, and then they go to the end column and they find out what PSAP, what 911 dispatch location should be answering that call, and based on the list, which must be kept up to date whenever an address is added, moved, that is then how the call is routed. Significant change in that next generation is, if you see in the middle, it's now going to be location-based, map-based. And again, that's why I've indicated that GIS is so paramount. You're going to need to understand the X and Y coordinates, much like your GPS on your phone, in order to identify which PSAP should be responding. And so with all of that, of course, in any scenario, it's very blind to political boundaries, but political boundaries too must be taken into consideration. So that's a lot of where Bud has suggested that the state and our influence and our participation is where we are working with the counties at that state level to make sure that we have coverage beyond just an individual county's border, and there's communication amongst all of the participants. If you move on to our next slide, So in brief, what are the benefits of Next Generation 911? You're going to get a more accurate location. So we are going to be able to have information such as the vertical information. So right now, for example, this building, if there's an emergency in this building, a dispatch will come to this building, but they don't know which floor it's on. There are many, many rooms on many, many floors. Or even, for example, a high-rise residential structure. With the implementation of the Next Generation 911, the integration of GIS, you can now add that vertical feature so that the dispatchers can even more quickly get the emergency personnel to the exact location of the emergency. Again, X and Y coordinates are used much like your GPS again, so that any location, it does not need to be tied to an address, can very quickly and easily be identified. The side of the road, the middle of a field for a search and rescue, et cetera, is enhanced. That response, again, is enhanced through the data that is being filtered through the system. And then boundary clarification, just to ensure that all areas are covered, there are no gaps, there are no overlaps. Again, this is enhanced through the use of GIS. You have multiple endpoint options, so these are all things that need to be considered with the enhancement of technology. So not only is there call, but there's also text and video. The current systems really can't handle the text and the video options, and as you can imagine, those are things that are significantly coming into the dispatch centers, or there's a need to have that information coming into the dispatch centers to assist, again, in a response. And then the benefits, again, are collaboration through technology. So we're sharing standards through technology, but also through policy across the entire state and across different regions with border counties. There's interconnected systems, so if there were to be a system that would go down or a part of a system, you immediately have a backup in another location, in another county across the state. It could actually be a county from the other side of the state. So if there's a hurricane coming in and affecting our Eastern Shore neighbors, very quickly with the interconnected system, a Western Maryland county could assist them during a significant event and vice versa. And then the support of integration as we continue to move forward and enhance the technology. If you will continue with me to the next page. So I think I've hit upon a few of these key points to consider, but I just wanted to make sure that they were hit home. GIS, again, is the foundation of Next Generation 911, the entire strategy. So at all levels, that's not just at the local level, that is also at the national level. The areas that have to do with the spatial reference, the service area boundaries, or sometimes known as the PSAP boundaries, address points, road center lines, and property boundaries are all information that needs to be available and highly accurate within the GIS system in order, again, to expedite the process, expedite the response in order to provide a very speedy response to the citizens. And then again, the regional collaboration and data sharing, as I gave the example, so that very easily and very quickly you can expedite that interconnected system and support one another at the larger statewide or regional scale. And then another key point to consider is cybersecurity. So we are moving into an enhanced technological system. We are going to be relying more heavily upon IT. And with that comes the considerations of hacking and any other nefarious activity that organizations try to take advantage of once you're going into the IT realm. I have to say that I have been seen firsthand. Washington County has actually stepped up in a pilot, as a pilot county, and received a full IT assessment through some funding from the Numbers Board, and Washington County was found to be in a very good position. The security of your IT infrastructure. That includes not just those for the PSAPs themselves, but the IT infrastructure and offices around the PSAPs have been found to be very, very sound and very strong. And so that in itself is very good, but I also want to applaud Washington County for being very forward-thinking in understanding that cybersecurity is one of the many things that has to be taken into consideration as we endeavor forward into Next Generation 911. So, and I know Berdana has the full report if that's something that you all would be interested in receiving. And then finally, Bud did ask if I would just give a little bit more information about where the state's role is at this time. In the state of Maryland, and this is not the case in every state, but in the state of Maryland, the PSAPs and the dispatch and the 911 considerations really do come from the county level. And so in the most part at this time, the state is just trying to offer support to the counties, helping with communication amongst counties, helping with the coordination of information, education as we move forward. But it is not the state's interest at this time to be providing any kind of edict or demands onto the individual counties. It will be the counties, up to the counties to determine how they proceed into the next generation of 911. But with that being said, we are keeping our ears open and staying involved so that we can help and advise. We see that there is benefit to collaboration, coordination, there's cost sharing, of course, and then also being able to, again, support one another if we are all using similar technologies. And so we again, continue to encourage counties to be forward-thinking, to start looking at the software and the other technologies that are available. There are a number of vendors that are already available for procurement throughout the state and through various contract vehicles in order to start implementing the various parts and pieces of the NG911 system. So to that point, the numbers board has become very focused in on having a strategic procurement plan and making sure that all of those various options are transparent and accessible. The coordination, as I said, of the technology, and as it evolves, just keeping everyone abreast of what the various counties are doing. And then actually the numbers board has been proactive and has hired a company called Mission Critical Partners in order to do an analysis of GIS data preparedness that's statewide. They will actually be coming out with a bit of a scorecard for each county, and that is to come out very soon. And that will tell each county where they are in terms of the layers in particular that I mentioned before, which were the service area boundaries, the parcel boundaries, the address points, and the road center lines, which again are really the core foundation of the GIS data necessary for the next generation 911 system. Sorry if I didn't mention, the report card should be coming out very shortly, I think another month or two, and that will be made available to all of the counties. And then particularly within our office, we actually found a software partner who we believe can be very beneficial to any county. And so we are looking at a purchase that would be for a collective application in the sense that the state would host the application, and then through a web interface, each of the counties would be able to use it for the first year at no cost. And then as we have a collective group of counties that might be interested in continuing to use it, it would be of a minimal cost because we would be able to share the costs of that software. Again, trying to pass the cost savings through collaboration and coordination. We will continue to educate, show up to events like this so that we have opportunity to continue to spread the word and just make as many people aware. We're also working very closely with our Maryland State Geographic Information Committee called MSGIC. We're being proactive as a GIS community to make sure that we are educating the GIS community, those within the GIS community who support the PSAPs, and then the PSAP directors, and really closing the gap of communication between those two communities, as well as the emergency managers throughout the state, so that we're all starting to speak the same language, we're all understanding each other, and we're all working towards a common goal. And then finally, the state has traditionally done some key data consolidation and access. We've actually been consolidating address points statewide for a number of years now, as well as the central lines. We are now moving forward and collecting the service area boundaries, the PSAP boundaries, as we said, and the parcel boundaries to make them available. And again, this is to help facilitate that regional approach, that statewide approach, so that counties can support each other no matter where they are geographically, but through technology. they can provide that support that is oftentimes necessary. Again, this was just very brief, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. If you have any questions, I can make myself available.
Questions, comments, commissioners?
All right, I have a few more points to make on the local level for Washington County. Thank you, Julia.
Of course.
So you can see that's a big topic, and we are beginning to work on this project right now. We're meeting regularly, the GIS office, the 911 office, the planning department, and we're trying to get ahead of this game a little bit. We're also going to be working with the city of Hagerstown. We've briefed the fire chiefs, we've met with Sheriff Mullendore, and three issues are coming up first. One is, as Julia said, the GIS will be an integral part of the next generation 911. One of the things we need as part of that GIS is a more accurate PSAP boundary or county 911 boundary, and we're looking at making that boundary based on property parcels, whether they're assessed in Washington County or Frederick County is our most troublesome boundary as far as the state goes. The Mason-Dixon line, the Potomac River, they're fairly straightforward, but South Mountain being the boundary with Frederick County is going to be a little bit tricky. So we're using the properties as they're assessed, whether they're assessed in Washington County or Frederick County, and that will determine which 911 office gets the call. So we're working with Frederick County to define that a little more carefully. We've run into a little bit of a issue with the sheriff, and Sheriff Mullendore informs me that the sheriff's office must respond to 911 calls based on the legal boundary of the county. Now, again, the top of South Mountain is the boundary of Washington County, but when we get to Next Gen 911, that has to be very carefully drawn on the map, and it's not that easy to find the legal boundary. I've spoken with Kirk about that, and we are still working on that, but it is a little bit of a difficult issue to define exactly where that legal boundary is. The most recent survey that was done was in 1824. Obviously, that's not a very accurate survey, but we're going to be looking at that a little bit more. So that's number one on our list of to-dos, to define that PSAP boundary. The next thing are addresses. The addresses need to be more accurate, and the planning department is the addressing authority. They assign addresses as new developments are built, but they've gone through and done an audit of their addresses, and they've found certain problems in areas. Sometimes it's just an address here or there, so there will need to be corrections made, and they'll be doing that. They may need to work with the fire chiefs to try and get some local people in the communities to cooperate with them where there needs to be some addressing changes made to make those addresses conform and be more accurate, because these addresses are going to be used directly in the 911 system. We've had addresses in our GIS for many years now, but it hasn't been at that critical level, and these are life and death type decisions that will be made according to that data. So the other thing is there are the municipalities of the county, and we're working very closely with the city of Hagerstown, and they've been very cooperative. Some of the small towns, they have very little development and don't often assign addresses. When a new development comes into one of the smaller municipalities, they have the jurisdiction and the authority to assign the addresses. We feel that it would be better if there was only one addressing authority in the county with the planning department, and that way there can be no room for error as far as any duplication of road names or inconsistencies in the addressing. So we'll be talking to the municipalities and asking for their cooperation in allowing the planning department to be that single addressing authority. Hopefully they will agree. If there's a problem, we may need to come back and look for other solutions to that. There are other places, some private enclaves. One that comes to mind is Farney-Keedy, where they have a small development inside private property, which was never addressed according to the county grid system. So we'll, again, be looking at them and trying to persuade them to conform to the standard that we have for the county. So we'll be looking at working with the fire and ambulance companies to help us with that. One other item we've got is yes, I mentioned Farney-Keedy. So we're going to try to make this as foolproof as possible, as error-free as possible, as we go about making the corrections over the period of a year or so. The timeline for the implementation of this is not really set yet, but it will be a multi-year process. But we need to get started on it now, and there may be other issues that come up as we go through the process, but we wanted to give you a heads up at the beginning so you know what Next Gen 911 is, and we hope to be able to tackle it as efficiently as possible. And again, we'll take any questions that you have.
Any questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, the general fund contingency funding request, Town of Hancock, Mr. Hovis.
Good afternoon, Commissioner.
Good afternoon.
Commissioner Jim Hovis, Director of Washington County Office of Community Grant Management. With me is Councilman Leo Murray from the Town of Hancock. He's came down today and can answer questions more in detail on what we're here to talk about today. Town of Hancock has submitted an application for general fund contingency funding for a project in Hancock. They have developed plans to improve and enhance Widmar Park. Included in those plans are enhancements to the park's memorialization of the veterans from Hancock and the surrounding communities that have served or gave the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our country. The improvements to the park are designed and planned to complement and coincide with the dedication of the new Hancock branch of the Washington County Free Library. Specifically, the project will include the erection of over 50 poles with double banner brackets capable of holding 2 veterans flags on each. Those poles will be placed around Park Circle Road in Widmar Park. In addition, the road will also be renamed Veterans Way in a ceremony dedicating the project next spring. The project will also complement the existing Veterans Memorial in Widmar Park, as well as the new library, which will also be renamed Hancock Veterans Memorial Branch Library. So if you can see, Hancock has tied everything together here for that park to be a huge memorial to the veterans, the way it looks. The town has estimated the cost of the project as currently planned at approximately $57,000 for equipment and labor. The town has currently committed $25,000, and there is additional $5,000 available from Parks and Recreation. The town has also collected private contributions totaling more than $6,000 for the project. So as you can see, there is also community support for this worthwhile project. Should the county be able to contribute the requested $10,000 for the project, the town manager has indicated the town will be able to identify and raise the remaining funding gap of $11,000. It is the recommendation of the Washington County Office of Community Grant Manager that this application be approved and an amount to be determined appropriate by the Board of County Commissioners. Now the fiscal impact will be the general fund contingency will be reduced by the amount of the funding awarded, if awarded here today. Mr. Murray, do you have anything else to add?
I came here today, Mayor Schiavano wanted to come down, but he had other commitments. And we felt it was important to come down to see you guys. Looking forward to working with you and hope you approve our funds for this project.
Mr. Murray, did you provide the commissioners with a description of the project previously.
I gave
Several
them-
weeks ago, I believe you were.
Yes.
So they've seen the diagram in which.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're now up to 99 veterans banners so far, and we still got orders coming in.
I think it's a great project. I know for myself, I'm going to support the maximum amount supported by the other commissioners.
And the amount that Hancock's requested to 10,000, it is consistent with what this board has provided to other communities with similar, actually completely different, but still in similar and memorializing our veterans. Be consistent with that.
Yep, I mean, I'm in support of it. So.
Motion
But
to
I-
approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the approval of the $10,000 coming out of the contingency fund. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to say on behalf of the veterans and their families in Hancock, Hancock Town Council, and the Parks and Rec, to give you a great big thank you, and for me personally also. It means an awful lot to the people of Hancock, and I was talking with Mr. Slocum, and I think it's important that the towns and the county work together, and looking forward to working with you guys.
Leo, I think you did a really good job with the project. I think you spearheaded that. You probably won't take the credit for it, but certainly a
Well,
lot of the work's behind you.
it's the
I think
Hancock
it's
Parks and-
amazing that you have 100 banners so far. That's quite a bit for a small town. So, good job.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
all.
Mr. Murray.
Thanks again.
Yep, good luck.
Thank you.
Okay, Health and Human Resources Reclassification, Realignment Duties, Ms. Stone?
Good afternoon. My stuff. Fine, how are you all? Good. Okay. I'm here today to request a realignment of duties in my Health and Human Services Department. The reason that I've come before you for that has to do with some additional duties that I have been requested that came before you a couple of weeks ago that had to do with some of the recommendations that came from our investigators and some things that I'll be working with the county attorney's office on a little more closely. So given that, what I'm coming before you to ask for is a couple of new positions, not new to but change in duties for a couple of my positions. The first is that I would like to move Debbie Payton from the benefits manager to the deputy director of human resources. This is a grade 14, step 9 to a grade 16, step 7. This has an increase of $6,170. This way, Ms. Payton can take care of the everyday operation that's going on in the department. Allow me to be out and about in the community more, to be able to handle some of the things I don't have time for now.
Also I'm sorry,
That's all right.
Steph, but it's also a matter of succession in that there is also a chain of command within the office that Steph has someone to rely upon regularly in the clear protocol and procedures, which is more of where we're headed and attempting to address with all employee satisfaction.
Correct. And she has been filling in for me when I haven't been around currently. The next is that Krista Shipley, who's the current HR administrator, I would like to move her to HR coordinator because she is, since I won't be doing retirement anymore, she's going to be picking up a lot of the duties having to do with retirement in conjunction with Debbie Payton. They'll be working on it together. And given that her duties have increased, so she's currently a grade 11, step 11, moving to grade 12, step 10, with an increase of $2,580. Brittany Hyatt, with the change in Debbie, I'm requesting that she move from an administrative assistant to a benefits coordinator. She'll still be working with Debbie on benefits, as Debbie has been doing now. But in order to do that, I'm requesting to move her from a grade 9, step 2, to a grade 11, step 1, with an increase of $4,700. The others that you have in front of you are just name changes. They are not changes with any duties. Just to make it consistent with what Brittany is, I would like to change Tracy McCammon from the title of Risk Management Administrator to Risk Management Coordinator, and Brian Overcash changing his title from Safety Compliance Training Administrator to Safety Compliance Training Coordinator. There will be a total increase to the Health and Human Services budget of $13,450 with this request. I've provided for you an organizational chart of current and what I'm proposing, and also job descriptions for myself, Director of Health and Human Services. My position is not changing. Deputy Director, Human Resources, Human Resource Coordinator, and Benefits Coordinator, because all of them have included additional duties or different duties. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Questions, comments, commissioners? If none, we need a motion to approve as recommended.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion second for the approval of the recommendation. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
4-1.
Thank you.
Okay, revised updated policies, Ms. Stone.
I am here with Kendall McPeak. We have been working together on updating the policies. You were provided a notebook full of the policies that have to do with our employee benefits, our PR, and our risk management services. They are all under the purview of the Health and Human Services Department. And we have been working on this for quite a while. We came before you previously. What I've provided here after some comments from you as commissioners, I've provided some updates on the ones that we made some changes to after we met with you last time. PR 13, the anti-harassment and complaint procedure. PR 21, violence in the workplace. PR 26, whistleblower policy. PR 34, leave policy. PR 36, tobacco-free campus. PR 37, anti-discrimination and complaint procedure. And PR 39, cell phone use during board meetings. What we've provided for you includes any of the changes that we made since the last time we brought these before you. Also in your packet is a summary of all of the policies, including any new policies which are to be adopted with the changes that have been made with the summary. The policies that are to be abolished, which they're abolished because we have included them all in other policies, and policies that are to be affirmed with no substantive changes. I would be glad to go through any of these individually if you would like, or I can answer questions at this time. Kendall, I don't know if you have any additional comments, but we're both here to answer any questions y'all might have. Correct. And some of them I'm interested in being able to move forward with the training and that sort of thing that needs to go along with the policies.
This is where a complaint comes forward, it goes to the attorneys first.
Correct.
Question I have, do we have any union contracts with a grievance process that this would interfere with?
No.
So
We
the
haven't-
grievance policy goes up and it would be diverted to the attorney instead of through the human resource person?
Well, if there's a grievance in the union, there's a process that's in the union contract.
Yeah, does that process go through human resource first?
Correct. Yes.
So instead of going to human resource, it would go through the attorney? Or-
We wouldn't be changing the contract.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at. That contract would remain the same.
That would remain the same. Now, certainly, if there's any information that comes to me from that, I automatically get the county attorney's office involved.
Hey, any questions, comments?
I would like to say, since I did ask this to
Sure.
be held up a week or two, and you gave me 3 weeks, so I thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks for the idea.
I just wanted some time to review it, and Kendall, the attorneys, Stephanie, Rob, have been really good in kind of sitting down with me, so I could just make sure we get this right.
Well, we want to make sure of that, too.
We want to do it right. I just want to, I guess, point out what Commissioner Klein had mentioned, kind of the process of how harassment would be reported and dealt with needs to be done correctly, and that's one of the reasons why it was so important that we do it. How the new policy stands, and I didn't have any corrections or changes to that. One of the other questions I had, and I think it might be worth pointing out to employees, and one, we need to make sure employees get this in some form or fashion, know where the new policy is. I don't know if they get an employee handbook. Is it located online?
We will
That's-
have, we have
that's
the
a-
opportunity, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I'd like to be entirely clear, if it's acceptable to the commissioners, we will make this available online and keep that source document online, because it's been extremely cumbersome to keep a handbook printed and keep everyone having the same handbook. So throughout the policy process, that's been a discussion, so I appreciate you bringing that up and for discussion. That was staff's approach, is an online approach to it, a single reference.
We are ready to import them into the software package that we have. That'll be available to all employees.
Okay. And for example, the anti-harassment policy, it's quite encompassing. Also includes kind of a new policy, employee dating, which is something that wasn't covered
Correct.
in the past. So that's found within this policy, so employees know that it's not a separate policy, but it is a new policy, a new part of that policy. Just want to make sure they are aware of that.
Okay, any questions, comments? If none, we'll need a motion to approve these policies.
So
Have a motion, need a second? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the new policies. Any further discussion?
I'm not going to support it. I don't think we should shift the responsibility of employees speaking to the human resource person to the attorneys. I still think that should stay in place, and that's my opinion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 4-1.
I want to thank you all for your help in helping us put this together. Appreciate it. And big thanks to Kendall from my perspective.
Yeah, Stephanie and Kendall have been huddled together a lot.
Yes.
Working on these.
Yes. Thank you both
Big job.
very much.
You need an assistant to read it.
Okay, wage and related recommendations, Ms. Stone, Ms. Greaves, got it right this finally, and Mr. Slocum.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'll kick this off. As you know, Kim isn't available today, but Sarah's been asked to come in and provide any answers to financial questions you might have, or certainly if we don't have the answers, to seek them out and get them to you. So the Board of County Commissioners approved, and staff at that time initiated a salary study in early 2017. That was prior to a discussion on a 15% raise or a COLA or anything of that sort. The largely anticipated study was delayed temporarily. The additional time allowed for a benefit analysis. By benefit analysis, I mean the consultant was asked to go back and review the county's benefit program relative to other peer employer benefit programs. Also provided time for a detailed review and further consideration of investment in employee well-being. And by that I mean, rather than simply wage alone, what other things is an employer responsible or can do for employees to try to retain and recruit the best employees and promote the best employees to have the best possible staff, which is certainly where we want to be and like to think we are with a very good staff in place. The current staff has reviewed the pertinent information, including the available budget and draft study, and is prepared to present those recommendations. Before Stephanie begins, the study reached 24 peer employers. So the consultant reached out to 24 peer employers, some government, if not all government. Were they all government? Okay. And as well as in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, reached out to them, received data from 15 peer employers. Cost of living was applied to each. The cost of living for some of those peer employers was greater, some was less. So overall, a very useful study, very data-intense study. And as we go through these recommendations, I think what you'll find is the study is valuable and will be considered, but rather than relying upon, we are using it, or with the recommendations here, attempting to use it in reference to the study without reliance solely upon the study.
So for our discussion, just to bring you back, a wage increase was considered for the fiscal year 2018 budget, and it was to be effective July 1st, 2017. The board formally presented with recommendations for a 15% increase at that time. The board decided to proceed with a 5% COLA while awaiting the salary study, which was already underway at the time, for further guidance. This discussion will make these recommendations based upon the study result to date and other pertinent information. So we will be using the information that has been provided as reference and as information as we plan moving forward. With the benefits, as Rob said, a number of categories were analyzed against peer employers, ranging from medical, dental, and vision to paid leave, risk insurance, and pension. I think it's probably no surprise that the study found that all categories in the county provided equal or superior employee benefits. And I don't think there's a huge question on that, which made us feel really good. The benefits are difficult to quantify, so it's not like I can come before you with a dollar amount. But there are various plans with each personal account receiving different benefits each year. However, co-pays and deductibles may benefit county employees by several $1,000s over the peer employees. The county retirement plan benefit in dollar value also varies by employee, yet it provides outstanding value in terms of an employee contribution and security, given the fact that it's a defined benefit plan, which there are not a lot of those around anymore. In wages, the largest recommendation of the study was a new salary structure with a low and high cost option. The low option would cost $826,951 annually to place each current position in the closest step in the consultant's plan, while the high option would cost $1,743,045 annually to bring each position to the next highest step as compared to the consultant's plan. Staff in discussion is not confident the premise of a new structure will address the county or employee needs, which is what we're looking forward to with this salary study. The recommendations may prove unfavorable as the new structure introduces significant variation in pay increase from one position to another. So if you look at that, it wasn't a clear, consistent that, all positions were going to go up or down a certain amount. It's sort of all over the map, and you have background information that was provided to you. There is also some concern as well over the application of peer analysis and the cost of living data that was provided. Finally, the study did not consider ancillary improvements for employee well-being. So the recommendation before the board is to address employee well-being with 5 equally important investments: wage, equity, training, recognition, and team building. All of that needs to be brought together as we move forward with this process. The wage of the county employee has suffered from 0 increases in years 2011, 2012, and 2014. I think we're all aware of that. When increased in other years, the county increases largely fell behind other employers, particularly in our area. Even with the latest COLA, other employers have outpaced the county since 2000. The average wage increase for county employees since 2000 ranks 5th after 4 other peer employers that we have gained the information from. And that is the Board of Education, Frederick County, City of Hagerstown, and the State of Maryland. We're behind all 4 of those. The recommended COLA will address entry-level salary. With approximately 1/3 of the employees, the sheriff has explained concern over entry-level wages. In the future, the step increase should be reviewed in comparison with other employers, and the step of others is lower while considering COLA, a COLA increase of 3.5%, which we would recommend effective mid-January of 2018 is recommended. A subsequent increase in fiscal year 2019 is recommended for review as we move through the normal budget process.
What was the mid-January increase? I missed it.
3.5%.
And just for clarification, the 5% COLA that the board did approve and became effective July 1st did, according to the latest estimation, place us ahead of the state of Maryland regarding a certain salary if we track that over the last since year 2000. So instead of 5th, it's now 4th, and that's a recent update that was made. So.
That COLA did apply to the retirement and everything too, correct?
Generally, that's a separate recommendation. This is just dealing with current employees.
However,
That's open to discussion.
That's part of this discussion. Should the commissioners wish to
So you're saying when an employee gets a COLA increase, that does not help their retirement?
Well, the amount of money in the salaries goes towards the employee's retirement for an average wage, the average of the 3 highest wages. I thought that Commissioner Klein was talking about, does this include a COLA for retirees?
No, I meant this past increase that went into effect July 1st. You're saying a 5% COLA. Yes. Would that apply to the
Yes, that did
retirement?
go towards,
Okay, that's what
towards everybody's retirement, yes.
It's only like a stipend that does not apply.
Correct.
The COLA applies, so that's an extra benefit.
Right.
The other thing the COLA does is, with no COLA, which we have had step increases in years, with no COLA, the base or entry level salary for Washington County stays the same. So while others with a COLA increases, so that's part of what we've been subject to at the step 1 hiring. We've never adjusted that when there's simply a step increase and no COLA.
Just clarity, thank you.
Good question, thanks. The equity in pay and recognition across departments within the county varies for select positions. I think we're all aware of that. For instance, a highway position performing a very similar job to that in solid waste position may be classified differently. For example, in the highways, the highest is a grade 9. At solid waste, it's a grade 10. An airport position may be under-recognized in value, the goodwill creating repeat customers. It's not the same across the board in the county between the fire and rescue at the airport and fire and rescue in other areas. I mean, it's something for discussion. A tradesperson may save the county tens of thousands of dollars in service and productivity when compared to the labor cost of the same skills in the private market if we were to contract for those same skills. The wage of a budget and finance position may not compete with the other similar positions offered by local government employers. Each example and more were not fully identified or addressed by the study, yet they must be considered. We need to look through that through the whole county. So a review of individual departments is recommended for further consideration by the board. The training offered to Washington County employees is not on par with others. To be recognized for a desire to learn and empowered to grow with the county, all employees should be afforded the opportunity to request annual training of some kind in the field or in the work they're doing. Those who enjoy the opportunity to grow and learn will set an example of achievement. Training may include things like physical training or exercise. Because the county is self-insured, and investment in physical fitness is on par with mental fitness and is certainly recommended through our health insurance. Both are personal investments in the employee. A minimum training budget of $120 per year for each full-time employee is recommended to be used for training based on what that employee would like or what they need. The recognition of employees with extraordinary customer service is an opportunity the county has not recognized in the past. While more must be done to reward employees that reward the county and its customers by good service, a beginning is by offering extra training and related travel to training for model employees who strive to achieve and overachieve. Travel may include industry events, such as Public Works Association or the Maryland Association of Counties or other. Department heads and division directors deserve the trust and responsibility to reward their employees that have demonstrated and documented a desire to provide outstanding customer service. We certainly want to increase that, improve that, and make county employees proud to be county employees. A recognition budget of $77,000 per year is recommended to be distributed equitably by department size. Okay. The team building efforts vary greatly among departments currently. Consistency and equitable investment by position we feel is necessary. There are no means of support to a department head to offer the occasional celebration or recognize employees' achievements in the office setting. Some departments purchase shirts or jackets, while others understand, at least currently, that such goodwill gestures are against policy. We would like to recommend a budget of $25 per employee per year to be dedicated to individual departments for department-wide investment based on what the department would like to see. We feel each of these investments is calculated by employee to appropriately quantify and equally distribute each component of each department.
Are there any current departments that already issue shirts and stuff, like when we go to events? Like when we go down Mako, we're giving out team shirts, which is a good idea, by the way.
Right, right.
But there are some of them do have budgets for that.
Some do, and that's the issue that we have across for equitable recognition and distribution and teamwork approach, is that some do and some don't, and there is some vagueness and ambiguity to the policy. For years, having been here a number of years, some, including myself at a time, thought we can't do that. So to be consistent and in fact promote that at a very small budget seems to be quite worthwhile. And so I'll pick it up here at the fiscal impact. Just to be clear, these recommended investments are within the budget for this time and future fiscal years. It does appear that the future fiscal years do have consideration of the same recommendations being made here or at this level or above. A 15% increase per prior recommendation would require an additional 10% over the 5% COLA. So the 5% COLA you already approved addressed, obviously, 5% of that 15. So 10% over and above that would cost approximately $5.42 million per year, which exceeds the available budget of $2.85 million currently. The fiscal impact of the recommended investments, however, is estimated at $2.52 million. By reducing the increase that went into effect in July from 15 to 5, and ultimately with approval here to 8.5 for the remainder of the year, a savings of approximately $4.4 million will be observed for the fiscal year. Obviously, in future fiscal years, the entire 8.5% would be over the entire 12 months. So subsequent years, the savings opposed to the original recommendation would be about $2.9 million. We have not addressed the fact that the minimum wage will increase to $10.10 per July 1st of 2018. This stepped increase, or I'm sorry, this COLA increase does approach a portion of that. If we were to start today to go from 10.10 for all the applicable employees, it would be approximately $50,000. This reduces that cost to approximately $30,000 over and above what we have here.
You'll come back and address it then.
We can address it then. It will actually be with the board's approval. We will address it in the budget. As we go into the budget season now, in the last parts of November and December, and into the beginning of next year, we'll be addressing budgets, and we will not be showing any, for fiscal year 2019, we won't be showing anything below the minimum wage. So it will be addressed, and it is within the budget to address that.
And that is the last increment in the state's minimum wage increase,
Meet that
10.10.
We'll be compliant.
Exactly.
Okay, any questions, comments?
Yeah, I have one question. We are always concerned about turnover at certain departments because we don't pay enough. I think I read my 249-page thing online that it was labor grades 8 and 9 that are highest turnover levels or pay grades. Is that correct, or am I?
I can't specifically answer that, but I
I
know
wrote a note
that-
to myself, but I forgot to document where I saw it at. I guess what I'm working at is all this going to be enough to keep losing valuable employees that we train at high expense, and then they're trained and they see a job somewhere else for $4 more an hour. Is this going to help us overcome that?
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There is one aspect to that, and that's why what we didn't see in this salary study is it didn't find, for instance, when we visited, a select handful of us visited the emergency services, the 911 center, we found that they would often be working 12-hour shift without a break. As we vet through as part of these recommendations is to actually go through various departments to see what can be done on a basis that the job assessment tool that was used by the consultant, again, while useful, it wasn't fully conclusive to improvements that need to be made. And that's part of why we want to not rely upon solely the study, but use it as a reference and move forward with improvements that we know have to be made.
This is just the other thing is the sheriff's department. We're going to be addressing the entry level, the way I understand it. And what about, how do we compare with our neighbors to our east with Frederick with their salary of their deputies, either entry level or is this going to bring us to par and keep our qualified deputies here?
It will certainly help. It won't bring us fully to par, but it will certainly help quite significantly. What the latest number I looked at was above 30%, where we had lost ground against our neighbors because of, like I said, because of the lack of a COLA with steps, which address current employees, but they don't address entry-level employees.
COLA helps the entry level.
It does, yes.
Any other questions, comments?
The salary study that we have, is this something that we are going to be continuing to use? I know this is just a draft form of the salary study, but there's a lot of information in here that I still think that we haven't begun to tackle with this. I kind of sympathize and think about the entry-level employees, and it is true that there is a cost, and you're going to have some move on to greener pastures. That's the way it goes. But I look at the salary study, and the high cost option of correcting where we are is $1,743,000, and that's not necessarily an across the board. Is that correct? That's
Correct.
kind of looking at the departments, the positions individually,
Yes.
deciding what needs done to get them up to par. And then-
based on the classification system they provided in
So
recommendation.
then the 3.5% comes in at a cost of, actually more than that, of about 300,000 more than that. So we're being more generous than what the salary study recommends
Correct,
with our total expense.
correct.
But that doesn't still solve the inequities among, you mentioned the MEOs or the firefighter at the airport versus a county firefighter and special ops, for example.
Which is why we see this as a continuing process where we will go through each department using the salary study as a tool to try to make some, the situations that we're aware of, to try to bring them to a different place, so that
And
we
in
don't
your-
have those anymore.
In your total budget is an allotment to address some of those adjustments. That's where the 250, not to exceed the budget, as we vet through each department for those inequities, that is accounted for in your estimate.
I hope we get to that soon. I just want to make the point that according to the preliminary salary study, it appears that some positions are getting a pay increase that's not necessarily warranted per the salary study. So we're creating that inequity. It's growing even bigger.
Correct.
I do want to say two things about the numbers. Well, first of all, the study in going to a new structure, which is the premise of this study, which there may be merit to it, but what it did is you can go down through, and it's not even in the draft study, it's buried deep in the data that we were able to find through staff's further investigation. We could go down through one position to the next as it was proposed, and it can get, speaking of inequity, it can go from 1.7% increase to one employee or position to a 10.3% increase to the next, just by going to that new structure. So we were very concerned about that because it didn't quite seem to match up with the job assessment tool that was performed, which was a good idea, it just didn't seem to match. And then the second thing is that I think it's a bit of fool's gold to think that we're going to be completely even with any employer, because as we look across, there's another spreadsheet that again is very large and cumbersome, and it's not in the study. But as you go across the 15 peer employers that we have, one may be very low compared to us, while another may be high. So to think that we're going to have an exact match of some, or be close, we can see even among those peers, they vary considerably. So, and I think it speaks to the fact that we each all have somewhat similar positions, but they do vary considerably.
When we looked at benefits, I didn't notice the list of benefits in the report. Was the use of an employee vehicle one of the benefits considered? I didn't see it listed.
Or they're not considered
No,
as
that
wage?
was,
Or
I
they're
look
not-
at Debbie because she helped me with that. No, that was not considered.
It won't be
That
calculated
wasn't
as
added
wage.
into the wage?
No.
Because that's a benefit that a lot of the entry-level employees don't have.
Correct.
You know, obviously, they don't need a vehicle, but that's a considerable savings. For those
Correct.
employees who do have an employee vehicle that they can use.
I think we
Maintenance,
try
wear
to
and tear,
look,
oil changes,
Yeah.
gas. It's a lot.
we try to look at, in those situations, it's those people that are constantly moving around, constantly going here and there. So, yes, it is a benefit. It's not a benefit to all, so we didn't include it in the salary study.
It's also a comparison at over 50 cents a mile reimbursement rate, according to the federal regulations, that, or IRS, I should say, that is it cheaper to provide that vehicle?
Oh, I'm not saying it's not cost-effective,
Just to-
but just to drive back and forth from home to work is a cost savings.
It is. It certainly is.
And one other thing I'd like to note, our healthcare was considered a Cadillac, is that the term we used the last time, where I read
Yes.
in there that it fared more favorable than our surrounding peers, so there, even though that's not calculated as wage, that's still something that's important. So I do want to point that out, that is positive.
Particularly the percentage that we provide in the cost compared to what the employees provide, as well as a very rich plan.
That was the term. Yeah, okay.
So with
Any other questions, comments? If
If none, we do need a motion to move forward as presented. Or do we need a
Motion or
consensus?
concurrence, what are we doing?
Concurrence. It says concurrence. I don't know, either.
I'm okay with moving forward with it.
Yeah, let's do a motion.
Okay. Motion to move forward.
Everything that's recommended in the handout.
A combination of wage, equity, training, recognition, and team building.
Yeah. There's 4 components to it. Equity, training, recognition, team building. Yeah, wage, equity, training, recognition, team building components, all 5.
It's on the second page of the org. I'll motion, you ready, Terry? I motion to move forward in regards to wage, equity, training, recognition, team building, the 5 components as suggested.
Yeah, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board of Education Legislative Program, Mr. Slocum.
Thank you. I see we have some Board of Ed and staff members here. Welcome.
Those people snuck in, didn't they?
In brief, in the November 7, 2017 joint meeting with the Washington County Board of Ed, the Board of Ed presented 3 proposed local initiatives for the future delegation meeting, which, by the way, is coming up December 5th. Those initiatives are repeal of public local law to remove the Advisory School Design Review Committee, best known as ASDRC. 2, increase maintenance of effort, otherwise known as MOE, based upon the Consumer Price Index. And 3, dedication of funds from automated speed enforcement to school resource officers. The Washington County Board of County Commissioners have been requested by the board to provide a response to legislative program items above. The following information is offered from the annual operating and capital budget to share the existing spending on programs related to those requests in the operating and capital. So these 3 requests that you have in front of you broach upon both operating and capital budgets. That's why these figures are included here, or images for some background. As you can see in the pie chart there, 37% education, which amounts entirely to approximately $110 million. Education is a top priority in Washington County, with over 1/3 of the county's operating budget going to public education. Washington County proudly supports primary, secondary, and higher education opportunities in the county, along with vocational professional training programs. The commitment to education is the single largest expenditure in the county's budget, and also well over 2 times the public safety budget at 16, which is close to 16%. Fortunately, the budget increased slightly overall in education at 2.30, where the Board of Education itself increased up 2.33% from the year prior, given that the year prior to that it was flat. So then switching quickly into the capital budget, leaving the operating budget just for an overview on that, nearly 1/3 of the county's capital budget in fiscal years 2018 through fiscal year 2027 is dedicated to education facilities in the 10-year capital plan. Staff from both the Board of County Commissioners and Board of Education has reviewed these tables you have in front of you in your agenda report, and it shows history from fiscal year 2009 through 2018. The first one is the local funding, and that's entirely local money. That is not grants or awards or anything else. That is entirely local dollars. That is since 2009. And first in capital, that does range significantly. And I would like to make a placeholder for a future discussion and even for consideration in the budget of the next year coming, that the minimum match to the IEC is recommended in future budgets. So I can be corrected if I'm wrong, but 29% match is required for IAC money, meaning that any match that can't be made is lost in state IAC money, which could be a significant loss to the county, to the Board of Ed, to the students, et cetera. So I think that's a no-brainer that must be approached in future budget years. It's been exceeded many years, and it's been close in other years. So we will look at that in this upcoming budget cycle and future cycles for some consistency. Board of County Commissioners, as far as maintenance of effort, since 2009, that is shown as well. 2009, it was approximately 86 million. It's up to 97 million. That is a formula that is arrived at by state law. So that's an overview. Now to get specific into the three requirements, the ASDRC, which is again the Design Review Committee. The Board of Ed had stated that it's $25,000. There may be an opportunity here with the staff of both the Board of County Commissioners and the Board of Education to see that the submittals by the consultant to that are aligned with submittals that any owner would receive, so that it's not an additional or overburdensome process. Typically, a submittal at 30, 60, 90, or in this case, I think it's 95%, are typically observed regardless. So if we can better align those to situate with the Board of Ed's needs and keep those costs low as possible, that might be worth considering. The other thing to look at is in spending the amount made, the $25,000, if indeed it is that much, may very well be worthwhile. I know in past years, based on reviews of design, there have been significant savings in design and construction based on the review, and we do have examples of those. So hopefully through coordination and collaboration, we can reduce that expense. The MOE by law, and I'm not an MOE expert, I've simply done my best to find what I could, and I do apologize if there are any mistakes in this, but from what can be told, the MOE by law provides clear budgeting criteria to the county as well as county statewide. For reference, Washington County Board of County Commissioners has met or exceeded the MOE criteria required by state each year, while some counties have not met the criteria, and some counties in the past have requested a waiver to the criteria. And that is even that waiver criteria, from what can be understood, is a fairly dynamic process still. More information was not provided as far as others, including a CPI, except Montgomery County does, in some of their calculation, include provisions for a CPI in certain circumstances. However, it also should be mentioned that Montgomery County has been noted that they have been short and placed on notice as recently as 2015 for their MOE. In other years, they may have exceeded it. This is simply in 2015. So now finally, school resource offices are budgeted at $700,000 in the fiscal year 2018 Washington County Public School approved operating budget. Actual officer expenses in fiscal year 2017, going 1 year back, were $603,954. The officers' actual expenses increased from $354,184 in fiscal year 2013. The sheriff has provided to each of you commissioners, I believe, remarks to his position and considerations for the automated speed enforcement revenues going to these school resource officers. Fiscal impact, to wrap it up here, if coordinated properly, ASDRC can be more manageable and certainly return investment on that $25,000. The MOE, if it were applied to the latest numbers, one CPI of 1.3% in 2016, applied to the 2016 budget, MOE budget of $94 million, would result in a cost of approximately $1.23 million. That is currently not funded in this or future budgets looking out. And finally, school resource officers appear to be, in addition to the MOE expense, would cost approximately $700,000, which is unfunded as a separate expense. And I do apologize for the spelling error on separate. There should be an E there in honor of the Board of Ed.
Okay, any questions? Commissioners? Comments, thoughts? Now, this goes from us to the delegation?
With the any discussion that comes out of this, staff will confer with the president, provide some letter for the president's consideration and execution consistent with this, with these points here. And as I said, I believe it's as early as next week. Is the meeting? The 5th, yes. So staff will certainly try to have that in place well before the 5th of the meeting so that you can see it, and perhaps it's discussed again there. Or
So we're trying to arrive to a consensus as to what we want to, what we're comfortable supporting.
yes. And obviously, if there are additional questions, comments, I can reach out to Superintendent Boyd-Michael and try to get those answered if there's any questions that aren't answered already here.
How are the school officers paid for now?
From our general fund.
And then that comes from the state and us?
Correct.
Because I didn't, maybe you can give us a quick explanation or information on what we thought the speed camera money was going to be used for.
Speed camera money is exclusive to public safety, so any revenue from that is exclusive to, must go to public safety. I'm not familiar with other counties that are using it for school resource officers. Obviously, that is a safety-related expense, so that would probably have to be discussed further, both legally on the use of those revenues and have some more. I'd like to have more collaboration before we were certain that they could be used for that.
So does maintenance of effort cover school resource officer salaries? You say general fund. Help me out there. Is general fund funded by maintenance of effort?
Well, when we say maintenance of effort, that's the absolute minimum by law. It could be a positive number, it could be a negative number. That goes into increasing our budget. As you're aware, over the last 10 years, the Board of County Commissioners had 2 years they gave money beyond maintenance of effort. They also, at that time in 2009, 2010, and I think up through about 2012, provided another $5 million outside of maintenance of effort for nurses, crossing guards, the Judy Center manager, buses. So all that was outside of maintenance of effort. Over time, all that's been pushed into maintenance of effort, and also you're aware that the pension costs got shifted down over a 4-year phase-in from the state, or some portion of it, from the state to the county. And there's a 4-year phase-in that amounts almost $4.9 million that the county had to shift into our budgets for maintenance of effort. We've expanded the resource officer program over 10 or 12 years, I guess. I think we're up to 9 resource officers. They have to cover all 46 sites in the building. We don't have anybody that's stationed at one location and takes care of one school. They're taking care of multiple schools per resource officer. So we've expanded that slowly through our budgeting process to try to cover additional needs related to safety issues. therefore, the maintenance of effort, it never was like we added a resource officer, so additional money was added to our budget. It's basically been through maintenance of effort. And within those dollars, we found ways to expand the resource officer program to meet the needs of our safety for students.
If we would eliminate the advisory school design review, could we substitute that with staff from Washington County government to have an equal seat at the table when it comes to qualified individuals with engineers and such that we have on staff that could be in replacement of that committee, working with the design?
I think that's what Mr. Slocum just described. I would probably reciprocate with that, with any programs that you have, library, construction of this building. Our engineering team probably could help assist with the reduction of costs and some of those things as well. So we probably could work together on that in both ways. So I'd be open to that.
So one of the quite salient points made by the Board of Ed and Mr. Michaels is that when a member of the ASDRC is a private contractor, which has great value and benefit, there's also a detriment because that member then can bid. And I did run the ASDRC a few years ago, so I'm familiar with this situation. It's an unfortunate situation where you do want that individual knowledge and local participation. So one of the through talking to those with knowledge of the situation, including Commissioner Myers, it would be possible for our staff who does have both inspection and construction and knowledge, code knowledge, so forth, and engineering knowledge in another department to make that review, which would then allow not to eliminate certain bidders or introduce the speculation of some bidders also being involved in the ASDRC, which is a legitimate point. It's just one we haven't been able to overcome until this recommendation was made. So,
What part of the school board budget is, I'll just call it your construction team? What does that consist of yearly?
Our construction team
Rob?
comes all out of the general fund. Rob Rollins, Chad Criswell, Brad
How much money does that represent for you?
$350,000. I mean, we have oversight of multiple projects.
I'm not saying, no, I'm not saying it's wrong. I've often wondered what is attribute, their position is that. They're not, today they're in the classroom and tomorrow they're on the construction site. That they're overseeing your multiple projects and so forth.
And things like enrollment projections, redistricting, a whole variety of things that team takes care of. State requirements for QZAB, ESP, state requirements for the qualified zone, academic bond. It's a funding federal money that comes to us, aging school project money that comes to us. They take care of open
For all that,
space.
even beyond bricks and mortar.
Enrollment projections. So they do a variety of things among those few people.
Now, how far back was there staff involved in that way back, but not having like on site or in construction? Used to be the Board of Ed would hire the architect, get the contractor, build the building, and turn it over to the school board. But what part of that was part of what you're describing, and how has it been increased?
I think the quality of work that we were receiving when we were doing it that way was inferior to the way we're doing it right now. So by having oversight of projects, there's also a great deal of red tape now with the government, how we have to do everything from the bids, bid approval, prevailing wage, lead, all those things have all complicated this whole construction thing a lot over the last number of years. That department is down 2 project managers. So at one time there was a 3 project manager department. It's now 1 project department. We were building a school every year on average. At this point, we're building a school every 4 years. So we've reduced that department at this point.
Okay, any other questions, thoughts? Okay, so I guess do you all want to reach to a consensus, move it on to the delegation? Do each item, we can do each item at a time, so we can, huh?
Each item separately.
Okay, and then I do have a question. What's your, you all have your surplus every year? You have an average, or what was your surplus last year, or anything like that, money left over?
I have to defer to David. A great deal of the surplus we had at the end of last year, we used probably more than half of that in this upcoming budget year to settle 2 open contract negotiations we had with ESP and the teachers union. But I'll defer to David.
We had about 2.3 million last year, and much of that has been earmarked for specific projects.
I think 100% of it's been now, what we call dedicated fund balance.
Designated fund balance.
And I don't know,
85 pieces of playground equipment because of safety issues, so we came, I think,
yeah, but I mean, you come to us, but at the end of the year on the surplus, and I may be wrong, do we have the ability to call that money back?
I don't think you do, or you violate maintenance of effort.
I know we've never asked for anything back, at least since I've been a county commissioner.
It's never guaranteed from year to year. It's just a result of it's just unforeseen things that happen. $3 million budget, and it varies from year to year how much it is. But this past year, that was about how much it was.
Terry, I have some questions first. Speed cameras, what's the estimated income off the first year of speed cameras? Second year, third year, they decreased. Is that not the estimate?
2.4, if memory serves correctly, for the first year.
And
we do believe that those will certainly decrease based on some of the sheriff's observations already. They are looking fairly favorable.
and has most of all, not all that 2.4 been set for already items to be budgeted?
It has.
So if we would agree to $700,000, well, then what happens?
That's why your agenda report says in the fiscal impact, it says it's unfunded. It's not funded today.
So the second year it goes down, third year the revenue goes down, but we'll be obligated forever for the 700,000. We just hired 8 additional career firefighters to assist. We know they need more than 8. So as we decrease that funding and peel it off from the speed cameras, how do we meet those other goals? And in regards to maintenance of effort, we just got done today showing that we finance county off the back of our employees. For 3 or 4 years, they didn't get a wage increase. And now here we're trying to adjust that. We went with like equipment at the dump, over $1 million worth of equipment at the landfill has been delayed. We put off buying plow trucks. And again, all this on the back of our employees. And now we're being asked to increase maintenance of effort. And where's the effort from within the school board to look within and help that budget themselves instead of coming to us for more money? That's what I want to know, how I'm going to explain to our employees and the people. And speed cameras, I voted against it, a large pot of money. Not everybody's trying to peel money off of it for different reasons. One of the reasons why I didn't support speed cameras. So I'm not going to support any of these initiatives. Thank you.
On the speed camera money, and we're into an election year, and it would only take another county commissioner 3 county commissioners not supporting speed cameras, and then they disappear. So you never know. You can't put a guarantee on that speed camera.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
And I think that's how we budget for the speed camera revenue too. Maybe not exactly, but we kind of earmarked that for the construction of the public safety training center. And knowing that that revenue would decline over time over the next few years. So we know that it's not guaranteed. I think that $2.5 million right around that dollar amount is correct for the first year. But whether you argue that people learn not to speed or people are more aware of speed cameras and slow down, for whatever the reason is, that revenue does decline. And we've taken that into consideration, I think, in how we've chosen to spend that money and utilize that money. It's not something that's ongoing in perpetuity. That's how we've kind of matched those funds, the use of those funds. So I have hesitation with that.
I'd be a little more conciliatory with my remarks and say, as we get into our budget year, maybe could look at it again. But at this point, no.
Michael, you had some comments.
Not speaking for the board, just commenting on behalf of them. saw the opportunity of additional revenue coming to the county from the speed cameras. We were just looking at it, a related item, the cost of additional resource officers. I mean, you're providing a full-time, actually 2 individuals from the sheriff's department out here to guard county employees and for your meeting, and we don't begrudge you that at all. We're just looking for a means to continue to fund the 9 resource officers that, again, they're covering 46 sites of very precious students that, you know, they're there to protect staff as well, but ideally they're there to protect students. So we just saw the speed cameras as a potential new revenue source and possibly means we could work together on something. The ASCDR committee, I never get those initials right. We're the only county in the state of Maryland that has that. Again, just something we're bringing forward as just one way to clean up the process. Much of what comes up out of the ASCDR committee is already under consideration by the architect and items that are already going to be adjusted and changed as we go through the process. We're one of the few counties in the state that consistently stays under the state cost per square footage, not only in total amount per square footage, but also in the collective amount of square footage per building. Frederick County always exceeds the amount of allotment per student, and they pay that 100% on the county side. So we were just looking at that as something for the county commissioners to consider. As we examined the numbers over the last 10 years, to answer your question, Mr. Klein, we reallocated, it's either 11.4 or 11.8 million within the Board of Education's budget to pay for raises and things like that. And I'm unclear whether the county employees got steps or not, because there's many years that our employees only got steps and did not get a COLA. Matter of fact, it's rare that our employees have gotten COLAs. They've gotten steps and a percentage at the top and various things like that. So we're doing a lot of adjustments within our budget. Last year, the cost for healthcare alone was $8.6 million. The total amount of money received from the county and the state barely met that obligation alone. We have tremendous increasing needs with our English language learners. Unfortunately, mental illness is just all over the place, particularly even elementary. It just breaks your heart. And we have a lot of things to address. In this last 10 years, we also gained 700 students as part of that increase and part of that mandatory increase. So we're just making you aware of these things, and I think the board was just making a reasonable request in these 3 items. So it's not, I don't think it's anything unreasonable they're requesting your consideration for. We appreciate you have a lot of other things to look at, but we have a lot of obligations in the school system that are getting more challenging every year, and the resources are minimal at this point.
This may be germane. It's a long-standing issue, and I don't think there's any solution. Nobody in this room is certainly involved in it. But the HURs, we learned again last night at the MML meeting that about $10 million at least for us. We knew this, but it came up at the MML meeting last night. About $10 million per year has been lost in the county, which has affected both boards and made it more difficult to come up with the appropriate funding. So
we recognize that, we truly do.
It's,
you guys get hit with highway user money, and so they have to pay for roads. And we're hoping that gets restored, and will certainly be looked at as a means to come back to investing in education. We had our first couple budget meetings yesterday and today, and we have a very desperate budget situation coming up for Washington County Public Schools. Again, we're going to have over a $2 million increase in healthcare costs, and I don't think, unless the county's identified as a low-effort county again as they were last year, that's what forced $1.4 million for the county to give last year was this identification. Unless you're identified as that, we won't even receive enough money to cover healthcare. So again, we'll have to look inside of the budget to maintain that. The only place I have left to really look substantially is going to be at positions. So we'll have position loss. As we did this year, we cut 6 positions to help pay for the healthcare and the raises that we gave this year. It will be substantially higher in this upcoming year.
County revenues back to the county from the state this year, are we going to get what we were anticipating? Are they up, down?
highway user or other?
Just
You know, our overall revenue sources.
overall revenue.
From the state?
I mean, the revenues are trending on
Decrease or increase.
deficit.
I think we're very similar to the 2.3 you saw in education. I think we're very similar to 2.5 to 5% increase perhaps at best, but those are largely projections based on taxes.
I was actually in Sarah's office this morning. I got this sheet. We talked a little bit about the budget and where we are so far. Looking at the income tax revenue, and a lot of this is cyclical. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it looks like we're down $442,000 from what we projected, budget versus actual. Hopefully around Christmas time, employment picks up a little bit and that could uptick. But as it stands right now, we're down $500,000 just in that one revenue source alone.
And it should. It's really early in the year right now, so those projections will be more accurate as the year progresses.
I guess where I was going with that, if somewhere along the line we get a significant increase in revenue, we could possibly do something one time for the officers or do a one-time allocation or something like that. But that would all be dependent upon our revenues.
And it is possible that some other source of revenue will be significantly more.
Yeah.
I think the superintendent mentioned some very important needs in the school system. We talk about the opioid epidemic, which is, serious, but sometimes mental health is overlooked as well. And it's very important. It can be costly.
In Washington County, I think between that and some other substance abuse, I think we're seeing the result of that in children. That's showing up in mental illness, or chemical addiction, results of that even in, birth of children and whatever.
So I would like to find maybe a creative way, a creative solution to help kind of finance and fund those needs. It needs to be a sustainable revenue source. It needs to be a partnership. A little bit from us, a little bit from you.
Right, new for us, the last 4 or 5 years, we've had about 400 English language learners. Kids that don't speak English as their first language. That's up to over 512 students this year. So we've gained over 100 in 1 year. And that's another thing. We added 2 what's called ESOL teachers or EL teachers last year. We have a request to add 4 more for next year. Again, that's all got to come out of this limited pool of money. So there's a lot of things to consider. So again, the board's request, we're just trying to look at means to work on a variety of issues related to funding.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Let's get to a consensus on number 1. Where's the position? Who's in support of number 1? Which commissioners?
What's number 1?
That was the repeal of the public local law to remove the advisory school design review committee.
I'm okay with that as long as we have some county staff in a similar capacity working like Dr. Michael was saying, maybe we'd even ease the help out. I have no problem with that.
Same here. Detail that with, what do you mean? It'll be in writing?
We have people here that are construction qualified individuals like engineers and such that are on staff now. And our administrator could assign those people to attend these meetings in lieu of the advisory board.
With that change in language like that, I'd support that one.
Okay, all 5 commissioners support number 1 with the inclusion of Commissioner Meyer's language. Number 2, increase in maintenance of effort based upon the consumer price index. Okay, I have 2 over here not in support.
No.
Okay, it's a 5-0 vote in not in support of that. Dedication of funds from automated speed enforcement to resource officers.
No.
Okay.
And what I want to
I'm okay.
add to that is if the Board of Ed wants to go to the sheriff, who is against it, and comes up with another solution, I'm open to listen. But I spoke with Sheriff Mullendore myself on that, and I think he would like to place the public safety dollar where he wants that comes from.
Okay, that one's 4-1 against dedicating the funds. And, for myself, if revenues come in way more than we anticipate, we could have some discussion on possibly some one-time support.
I would support your statement there, Mr. Baker, as well.
Yes.
I have another comment that's separate when you're ready, sir.
Oh, go ahead.
Last week, last Wednesday afternoon, I was invited to a discussion with emergency services and regarding opioid, and it was the state was there, and one of the considerations that came out of that was making application for a coordinator, for a county coordinator position. And the more I see of what Dr. Michael and the board, I'm sure, suffer from, and our own services, Washington County Health Department was there as well. If you'd allow staff to make application to the state for that coordinator position to be funded at least for a few years moving forward. Because both the Board of Ed and the Board of County Commissioners have are seeing a significant loss due to lack of coordination, and perhaps we could seek grants and so forth from that. We can have further discussion on that, but because the Board of Ed is here and we don't have another scheduled meeting, I thought that this might be a time to try to move forward on what we all have recognized as an opioid issue. So it's not a commitment other than looking at making an application with the state and talking to the board or to Superintendent Michael.
Okay, any other questions, thoughts? Thank you. Okay, we need a motion to go into closed session for reasons stated.
Second.
Motion second, any further